Greetings, this is Gary Abbott at USA Wrestling, and we're blessed on this call and show to have Bruce Baumgartner, our president of the organization, one of the greatest Olympic athletes of all time, and somebody who's kind of got a milestone going on this week, right, Bruce? I mean, I hear Friday's it, your last day working for Edinboro University, man. Hey, 34 years, right?
No, Gary, it's actually 36 years I was at Edinboro University. Started as an assistant wrestling coach in 1984. I became the head wrestling coach in 1990, director of athletics in 1997. 2018, I moved to assistant vice president for advancement. And after 36 years, I decided it is time to retire. And pursue some other interests. And obviously, my work with USA Wrestling will continue, if not intensify.
So let's go back to the beginning of the relationship. By the way, 36 years, outside of family, have you ever had a 36-year relationship with anything? I mean, that's a long time.
Well, my wife and I are celebrating our 38th anniversary this year. So
that's about
I have a lot of longevity in me.
Yeah, absolutely, though. That's awesome. So, yeah, you were able to go there with her as part of your life already. So
that is correct.
So let's talk a little bit about 1984. I mean, you created a relationship with Edinboro, come in as an assistant coach to work with Mike Deanna during that first Olympic year of yours. How did that all work out? You were at Oklahoma State prior to that at grad school, right?
Yeah, Gary, I was at Oklahoma State as a graduate assistant, and I finished up my master's degree. In March of 1984, had the opportunity to train up at Iowa for the Olympics in '84, and I met Mike Deanna, and he had asked me. He says he's taken a position at Edinboro University, and we're starting a Division I wrestling program. It was a Division II program when we first got here. Our first 2 years were actually Division II. We had a 0-11 record, I think, the year before we got to Edinboro. And I went to the World Cup in March and drove out to Edinboro, and we liked it. It had some opportunity, and I wanted to be part of a program to help make a difference and grow a program and make a difference in athletes' lives and, make a change. And I saw it like the Oklahoma States at the time, the Iowas, the really big schools. I mean, they had 10, 12 coaches, and really your input was not as great as at Edinboro, where it was really Mike Deanna, myself, and a graduate assistant that started the whole program.
So that year, obviously, you made a commitment to Edinboro, and you had a thing called the Los Angeles Olympic Games to deal with, right? So how did that work? Did you take care of the wrestling and then go on to campus after that, or?
Well, what we did is Mike was also training for the Olympics. He did not make the team. He was an alternate, Mike Deanna. We did a lot of calling, and if you remember back then, you had to dial all the numbers. There were no you went to your home phone or a phone booth when you were traveling and, dialed in a whole mess of numbers with the credit card. And we did a lot of recruiting and purchasing of equipment, arranging travel that whole summer while I was training for the Olympics. And, as soon as we returned back from the Olympics, there was that little celebration trip for about 3 or 4 days that the Southland Corporation put on for us. And by God, then we got a car and truck and drove from Stillwater, Oklahoma to Edinboro, Pennsylvania. And I've been there ever since. And I think it was a great move and situation for me.
So when you got to Edinboro, obviously you were working with Mike Deanna, a person you knew, but what kind of coach and mentor was he for you in your career as a coach? Obviously, there's a lot of people that are following wrestling right now may not know Mike or not know of him. And clearly that ended up being probably a very positive part of your development, right?
Yeah, Mike Deanna was a great coach, great guy. We still talk to this day. In fact, he still supports Edinboro University Wrestling. So, he was a great wrestler, great coach, awesome recruiter. He helped me in my wrestling. He obviously helped me in my coaching. A little bit different philosophy. Oklahoma State and Iowa had two different philosophies. He was a middleweight. I was an upper weight. So I think we really complemented each other. And I think it showed as our team, grew over the years. And, he helped lay the foundation for what I think is, one of the great success stories in Division I wrestling.
While you were there, Edinboro had their first champion, Sean O'Day, 89, right? Talk about
Yes.
that athlete. I mean, again, I was very active in wrestling in the young part of my life at the time, and I remember Sean O'Day, but what kind of kid was he to bring home that Division I title to Edinboro?
Oh, he was a great guy. I mean, he was actually a local kid. He grew up in Meadville, Pennsylvania, which is literally 30 miles south of Edinboro, and we were very fortunate to recruit him and get him. And super unbelievably talented. Still one of the quickest wrestlers that I think I've ever been around. He just pretty hard worker. Obviously to win an NCAA championship, very focused in at what he was doing, and went on. He still stays involved in our program here at Edinboro a little bit, and it's just been a good seeing those guys become successful.
Yeah, and by 1990, you had the opportunity to be head coach. What was the situation there? And then, obviously, if coaching opportunities were available for you, there could have been other options at some point. And you decided to take on the Edinboro as head coach, right?
Well, I did over the years have some different options, even when I was assistant coach, and then eventually when I was head coach. I believe in Edinboro, even to this day. It provides a very good education for the cost. It is academically student-centered. We're not all about winning, although we have won in a lot of sports, including wrestling at Edinboro, a lot of conference championships, a lot of All-Americans in a variety of sports. But I liked that there was academic integrity. I liked that it was about providing a good atmosphere for wrestlers to be successful. It also allowed me to go on, and I was head coach and competed as a head coach from 1990 through 1996 in my competition. So, it afforded me some things personally. It's a great town. Edinboro is a great town to raise your family, and it just, be honest with you, Gary, when we moved there, we thought we were going to be here at Edinboro for 2 or 3 years and be gone. My wife and I wanted to teach high school, and we just really liked Edinboro University and what it was about, enjoyed the wrestling program and its growth. And it just turned out to be a great, 36 years working at Edinboro, over 36 years working at Edinboro. And we will stay in the Edinboro community. That's where we'll have home base for the foreseeable future.
Now, when you were coaching, obviously you had an opportunity as head coach to work with some great athletes. And one of your kids went on to make the 96 Olympic team, Lou Roselli. Talk about Lou as an athlete. And obviously, he wasn't just a good college wrestler. He ended up being an Olympian.
Yeah, Lou was a very, very good, excellent college wrestler, excellent freestyle wrestler. If you look at in the 1996 Olympics, one of the most heartbreaking things for me is when Lou hurt his arm, his elbow, and I think he won that match and had to withdraw from the tournament. But I think he was poised to be an Olympic medalist, if not a champion, in 1996. And he went on with a very good coaching career at Edinboro University, then Ohio State, and now Oklahoma University. And again, he still supports Edinboro University's program. He was a very hardworking, driven, no-nonsense type of guy. Great work ethic. Just one of those guys whether it's in your practice room, on the mat, that you want to have around, because he's driven for success.
A couple of your multiple All-Americans became Division I coaches, Tony Roby, Tom Shiflett. Uh, you also had a multiple All-American, Jason Robeson, during your years as head coach. I talk about some of those guys. I mean, obviously, when someone moves on not only to compete but also coach at a high level, they must have picked something up from you and as part of the program.
Well, I would think that, hopefully those guys, Tom Shiflett was a very successful coach. Now he's an equipment salesperson down in Atlanta. Tony Roby, obviously the success he has had at Virginia Tech is awesome. Tony is another local individual here from Erie, and just 30 miles north of Edinboro. And, I would hope that those guys picked up some things to do and maybe not to do that I did along the way into coaching. And, whether it was their experiences with myself or Mike Deanna or Tim Flynn, we have at Edinboro and still producing. We have some other assistant coaches and head coaches. Matt Hill, our current head coach, is at Edinboro, is a Edinboro grad. We have a lot of Edinboro grads out there in the Division I, II, and III coaching levels. And, I think the guys you've talked about, Shiflett, Robison, Roby, are just three great examples of multiple-time All-Americans that graduated from us, good, hard-working kids that got an education and went on and bettered themselves after they left Edinboro.
So talk about the kind of kid that would wrestle at Edinboro. I mean, it's, we're not one of those big, huge state schools. It's Division II in other sports, but Division I in wrestling. You probably get more snow than most of the places I've ever been. Talk about the kind of kid that was successful in the Edinboro program and how you got him to go there and build that legacy.
I think from when Mike Deanna started till right now, even Matt Hill and through myself as head coach and Coach Flynn, Tim Flynn as head coach, you look for those kids that the hardworking, dedicated individuals that had the work ethic. They might not have been the absolute blue chipper at the high school level, but you knew they had the attitude, the work ethic, and the willingness to learn. And I think that's a key, the willingness to learn, to go on to be a great wrestler. And I think that's what Edinboro has done very well, is taking kids and develop them over a 2 or 3 year period so that they have that opportunity to be that 2-3 time All-American. And we've been very successful at that. And I think it's a smaller school. It's a little bit more rural. We are close to Pittsburgh, Cleveland, and Buffalo, so the athletes can go if they want to go to the big concert or the big professional football or basketball or baseball games, they can. But they're treated like an individual here. And if they're going to college to sit in a stadium with 100, football fans on a Saturday, in September, Edinboro's not the place. Edinboro's the place if you want to come and have good facilities, not great, hardworking atmosphere, good tradition, good education, being treated like an individual, not a number sitting in a classroom or on the team. Edinboro's the place to be.
So let's talk about your final year as head coach. I mean, they placed 6th in the NCAA tournament. That at the time was the highest placement that school ever had at the Division I level, I believe. What was about that team that made you guys make such a dent on the NCAA Division I level?
Well, I think we had some great athletes that year. I mean, that was, I think, Tim Flynn's 3rd or 4th year, maybe about 4th or 5th year into his coaching. And Tim was a phenomenal coach. And, he was instrumental to our success as an assistant. And obviously his tenure at Edinboro as a head coach was just awesome. I'm sure he'll develop West Virginia's program into a powerhouse also. Just a great person, great coach. And I just think we had some really good athletes, all came together. The hard work and a couple of good recruiting classes you know, came together. We redshirted some people, and it was just it was that successful year.
So, how did the athletic director position come about for you? And obviously, you chose or were part of having Tim Flynn stay on and be the head coach. Why did administration make sense to you at that time?
Well, a couple of reasons. The guy who hired me, Jim McDonald, had retired 2 years before. I think he retired in about 1995, and we had a athletic director in there. It looked like things were going pretty well, and then she left. So the administration was, I think it was in August, late August. So the administration was caught and was looking for somebody to interim, possibly permanently take the position as athletic director. And I started thinking, and some of the people that I looked up to in coaching, maybe the Russ Hellicksons, the Tommy Chesbros, Jay Robinson, Dan Gable. I saw those guys, and when they hit their 50s plus, 60s maybe, their bodies, and they just seemed to kind of wear out. And I knew I didn't want to coach wrestling when I was, 45, 50, going to be 60 this year. And I thought it was a great opportunity to me to move up. It was going to be a interim position at first, and I had to search for it. I basically had about a 6-month period, 8-month period to see if I liked it. And then they did eventually offer me. I wanted the job, and he offered it to me. It was also a great move for Edinboro wrestling because Tim Flynn at the time was getting ready to have his own head coaching position. And had I stayed as coach, I'm almost positive he would have moved on to a different school. And then, I would have had to break in a new assistant coach. So I think it just worked out for myself and my family. It worked out for, Tim Flynn and Edinboro University Wrestling. I think it was a good move for the Edinboro University. A little bit on the personal side of it, it was also when my children were starting to get involved in sports themselves. And although I worked more hours a week or a day probably as an athletic director than I did as a coach, I also had a little bit more leniency on when I worked compared to a coach. That recruit at the time, there wasn't as much YouTube and video. If a recruit wanted to go watch them play it, or at a wrestling match, at a high school wrestling match at 7:00 on a Thursday night, and that's when my son was competing in basketball or cross country or whatever, you had to go see the recruit. Where in the administration position, you could avoid some of those conflicts with your family. Not all of them, because you had to go to all the basketball games, football games, wrestling matches, volleyball, soccer, and so forth that you could make. But it was just the right opportunity, I think, for me to go from wrestling coach to administration. I knew I didn't want to coach into my 50s, especially after competing for so many years, Gary. I know my body would have not held out, trying to coach till my 50s or 60s.
Just another question about the years with Tim Flynn there. You were his boss as athletic director and watched the program even get stronger and stronger. But there was one year where Coach Flynn was able to lead the Edinboro Scots to a third place trophy, a trophy winning performance at the NCAA Division I wrestling tournament. How big of an achievement is that, knowing that program and just the kind of competition at Division I wrestling for little Edinboro to come back with one of those trophies?
Yeah, I think it's truly amazing that Tim and those athletes were able to do that, at an Edinboro University. And not to slight Edinboro University, but we have never been fully funded scholarship-wise since I've been at Edinboro, from assistant coach till today. Even when we were brought home the trophy at third in the country. So I look at those athletes, and I don't want to mention them all, Port Shop, Habit Mines, Avery, James. If I'm missing anybody, I apologize. But that team was just a great team. Most every one of them support the team. We just had an alumni Zoom happy hour a week ago. Almost all of them were back on the call. They're just, most of our athletes over the years were just great athletes, and it just all came together. I mean, it was just a awesome year for Edinboro wrestling, and we had some good years leading up to it, and we had a couple of great years after that. And don't know if in today's rules with the transfer portal that would ever happen again. I think some of those athletes, if it was that easy to transfer, might have tried to transfer out. I think, as you saw when Coach Flynn left, a lot of them did transfer out. But it was a phenomenal year for Edinboro wrestling. I think Division I wrestling as a whole, because there was a lot of excitement around having, a little school get a trophy. And I know it was a great time for Edinboro University itself.
So let's talk a little bit about athletic director job. 20 years about, right, or so? 20.
A little over 20 years.
Yeah, man, that's 2 decades of running a program and being the guy that has to be the coach of the coaches and the administrator and the person that was responsible for everything. What kind of things in that job did you like? The kind of challenges that allowed you to do a good job and feel good about your work?
Well, I think the one thing I felt good is for most of my career, most of my 20 years, the university was in a situation where, my job was to provide our coaches the resources, the guidance, and do a little, problem solving for them so they could provide a great opportunity for the student athletes. And quite frankly, the last couple of years in education, it's been a little bit more stressful for administrators. Probably starting around 2015 or so, it became a lot more. The NCAA started to inflict, have more and more rules and policies, state, federal, guidelines and reports and rules. And your job actually shifted from, as you said, being the coach of the coach and helping provide resources to almost monitoring, providing guidance, and running interference with just more parental involvement, more of the negative things. It just, and it was a great job the whole time. I enjoyed it, wouldn't change a thing, but it did change over the years. And it's kind of, a friend of mine at Cleveland State who used to do a bunch of reports said, and he retired about 4 years ago. He said, Bruce, he says, when I started this job, I probably did 10 reports for the NCAA, the conference, the federal government, and maybe total of 50 to 60 pages. And, that was 25 years ago, probably.
Yeah, yeah.
He said, when he retired, he said, I'm doing these same 10 reports, probably another 10 or 20 reports, and now it's 250 to 300 pages of reports. And it was more about, reports and less about helping the athletes and the coaches to help the athletes.
Now, during your time frame at Edinboro, you were also an Edinboro parent, right? I mean, your family went there. Right? Talk about what that was like. I mean,
that was very interesting. My 3 sons all graduated there. My youngest just graduated on Saturday, so real proud. It's a very good education for the cost. That they tried to pull the dad card occasionally, and I did not let him use the dad card too. I didn't ever call a teacher, administrator or anybody. I mean, they fought their own battles. They did their own thing. My older two sons, both, my oldest son was on the cross country team. He was a three-time All-State cross country track runner. My middle son wrestled. He tried to wrestle for Coach Flynn. Never made the starting lineup, but was a pretty good hard workout partner for a while. And my youngest son didn't play any sports, but I'm a proud graduate, or proud parent of 3 graduates of Edinboro University.
That's awesome. So your final couple years with the institution, you were working in university development, fundraising, other administrative stuff that wasn't specifically in sports. Were some of those challenges, since they were new things, that you enjoyed being part of?
Well, Gary, it was actually doing a lot of the same stuff as athletic director. I mean, at Edinboro, the athletic director at that point, position, I did an awful lot of fundraising. And one of the reasons why as we changed and a new president came over is they felt I could help raise some resources. And I believe I did a pretty good job raising money. I actually enjoy when you believe in what you're raising money for, the students and student athletes at Edinboro, to have a chance to be successful. And the amount of debt college students graduate with now is absolutely crazy. And the little bit of scholarship you can get, whether it's an academic scholarship or an athletic scholarship, all helps. But when you believe in what you're doing, you believe in the institution, it's pretty easy to go out there and ask other people to invest in those student athletes. And I think I've done a pretty good job of it, not just student athletes and students in general at Edinboro. And, it was a very enjoyable, I enjoyed every phase of my career at Edinboro.
So 36 years, Friday's last day. Why now?
Well, 2 things. One, I have seen too many people work long, 65, 70, and then when they retire, they don't have the ability to do what they want to do. Their health isn't there. I'm healthy. My wife is healthy. I am a state employee of the state system of higher education. They did give the faculty, and I was faculty, an incentive to retire, and it was called the sick leave enhancement incentive, and I took the incentive. The way it's structured, most people don't work after 35 years. I did 36 plus, and with the incentive, I felt it was time. Health-wise, I could lie to you and say, oh, I just want to spend more time at USA Wrestling, but I do plan on spending more time as president of USA Wrestling, and helping the sport of wrestling. And I do plan on helping Edinboro University where I can, and I plan on helping Matt Hill and Edinboro University Wrestling where I can.
Well, you and I could talk for like hours about wrestling, and we go back just in case.
Long time.
First time I think I met or saw Bruce Baumgartner was in the finals of the 1978 Junior National, which I was in, but I was not a finalist. I just missed All-American, but yeah, there was some big kid from New Jersey that won that year. I do remember that. So that's been a while, and we could talk about a lot of things, but outside of the Edinboro experience, I got 3 or 4 little topics I'd like to bring up for our fans right now. Obviously, right now with the postponement of the Olympics, there's a lot of attention on that 80 Olympic team. The year that the Olympics didn't happen for American athletes, and obviously it's also because they're both on 0 years. It's what, 40 years, right? You tried out for that Olympic team, and you know a lot of the athletes that made that Olympic team. What was it like then for them, and how do you compare that with the challenges that our athletes are facing with not being able to compete in Tokyo this year?
Well, I was alternate to the 1980 team, and I really felt for those team members that made it. And, a lot of them that weren't able to continue on till 1984 and make the team. They either, weight classes have changed, their bodies changed, they got old. So it really was a missed opportunity. And I feel, for the 2020 Olympians that, looked like they were going to make the team in all sports. Now it's going to prolong it 1 year. It may give some younger kids an opportunity, some younger athletes an opportunity to make the team, and it might make it a little harder for some of the older to make the team. But hopefully, and I use hopefully because nobody knows what the world will bring, and we learned that in this COVID-19 crisis. We are blessed with every day we have, and we better enjoy it. But I hope the Olympics can go on next summer, and we don't have the 2020 Olympics that never happened. Hopefully they can be in 2021. And it's difficult for those athletes and obviously loving the sport of wrestling, those wrestlers who had a plan to peak for the trials in April and the Olympics in it amounts to August. And now they've got to rewrite their whole plan. And right now they don't even know when they're going to be able to start to compete. I know that compete or practice. So it is a really difficult time for athletes, not only Olympic athletes, but athletes, high school or junior high school, college, professional Olympic athletes. Very difficult time for them right now.
We talk, it's an Olympic year, and every Olympic year you think about the Olympics. And 1996, the peers on the Olympic team voted for you to carry the flag into the stadium in Atlanta, the Centennial Olympic Games held in American soil. And I got to write the press release. But looking back, what was that like being the first American walking into the stadium holding the flag with one hand, right? I mean, it's a great picture, but it's got to be a wonderful memory for you as part of the sports community.
Gary, it was an awesome honor. I look at there's two different things in my wrestling career. I have accomplishments where I've gone and won the gold medal or bronze medal or so forth, in honors. And the biggest honor in my athletic career was carrying the flag in the opening ceremonies. That whole day was just phenomenal. I got to meet Bill Clinton, the President of the United States, and spent some time with him. Got to carry the flag into the Olympic Stadium, and it was the loudest. You couldn't even hear. If you were right next to me and I shouted, you wouldn't have been able to hear what I said. And it was so nerve-wracking. I literally was scared to death as I was walking around that I was going to slip, drop it, fall. And you laugh, as a little kid, your kids run through the house and they trip and they go, I meant to do that. Well, if you trip in front of whatever it was, 1 billion people on TV, there's no, you messed it up. And plus, I didn't want to do anything to disgrace our great country or flag. So it was pretty nerve-wracking. And it seemed like it was like 3 days of walking, even though it was, what was it, 4 or 5, 10 minutes or whatever it was. But it was just a great honor, to be, what is this affectionately known as the captain of the Olympic team in 1996. It was just an awesome honor, I think, for myself and family, and hopefully for the sport of wrestling.
You've been part of some great teams, and it's a pretty strong time right now for American wrestling. As president of the organization, looking at the group of athletes that we have preparing for the Tokyo in a year from now, how do you feel about how the U.S. Wrestlers could do over there once we get an opportunity?
Well, I think if you look at this year compared to 4 years ago, we already had more people qualified this year, and we still had another qualifying tournament to go. Our teams, especially our women's freestyle team and men's freestyle teams, have had unbelievably success the last 2 or 3 years. I think the Greco is really starting to improve and had some individuals there. I think we're really set up, for a good, I guess it's now 2021 Olympics. And, I just hope we can get the men and women on our team, training again, get them in good situation to train and be successful, and, put the COVID-19, situation behind us. I don't think we're there yet, but, hopefully, um, the pandemic will at some point be behind us and we can get back on the mat.
And just one last question for the interview here. As president of USA Wrestling, your responsibility, is for the whole sport here in the United States, and you work with a lot of people on a staff and volunteer level. And this challenge of getting us through the COVID situation, the decisions that have to be made in regards to turning the sport off, turning the sport back on at some point. How do you feel the organization and the sport has done so far in working through this and doing what we can as a sport to make the most of a bad situation?
Well, Gary, I think you probably summed it up. I mean, I think USA Wrestling is trying to make the most of a very bad situation. I cannot compliment, USA Wrestling staff, our volunteer, our team leaders, our state leaders, I should say. They meet weekly. We have a COVID-19 advisory committee of experts that meet about every other week or so, really trying to keep everybody informed. The board of directors, I know there's, regular meetings with our athletes, our national teams. We're trying to keep people informed. I think the important thing wrestling has to realize, and the coaches and the wrestlers, is that, in some cases it's great to be the first ones out of the block and the ones, setting the trends. And in other cases, it might be best to be a little cautious. And I think for the sport of wrestling, the last thing we need is to host a big tournament and then, 2 weeks later, we're responsible for spreading COVID-19 to 2 or 3 different states, and they track it back to a wrestling tournament. Social distancing is not made for wrestling. I mean, it's impossible. So I think we have to be cautious and working with the Olympic Committee. I know we're trying to work with the school college community and help keep them strong with some different things that we're collaborating with them on. So I think we have to be patient. We'll get this going again, but not that everything we have done is perfect, but we're trying to do it as well informed as possible, with as much input from our stakeholders as we can, and try to keep everybody informed. I really believe that at some point we will be back to a new normal, competing, and whether it's the 2021 Olympics or World Championships, whatever it may be, but whether it's local high school, junior high, we'll be back on the mat at some point before too long.
Oh, Bruce, I really enjoyed the time with you. Have a great day and a half before retirement, right? And we're going to enjoy sharing this with everyone else in the wrestling community. And thanks again for all you've done, not only for Edinboro University, but for the sport of wrestling. And the best to you and your family.
Well, thank you, Gary. And again, thank you for everything you do for us also.
Be well. We'll talk again soon.
Thank you.
Excellent.